Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, my name is Mohammed Sani Musa, representing Niger East Senatorial District. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, with your kind indulgence, may I lead the debate on the general principles of this bill. I stand before you today to lead the debate on Bill for Rape and Insurgency Victims Stigmatization Prohibition Bill 2019. This bill was first read in this hallowed chamber on the 10th of December 2019. I am delighted to have the opportunity to lead the debate on the bill for an act to prohibit the stigmatization of victims of rape and insurgency in order to encourage victims of rape to testify in court and victims of insurgency to be integrated into the community of his or her choice, and reintegration of victims and children of victims of rape and insurgency, and to provide for the prosecution and punishment of any person or group of persons who stigmatize such victims with the view to uphold and protect their fundamental rights to dignity and freedom of association as provided by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and for other related matters. Mr. President, you are all aware of the scourge of the instabilities in most of our communities in Nigeria, ranging from insurgency, banditry, and violence against women, children, and even men. Presently, rape is now a common phenomenon and occurs worldwide. In fact, available data suggests that in some countries, 1 in 5 women report sexual violence or being raped by an intimate partner, and up to a third of girls report forced sexual initiations. This also cut across diverse age range of victims, ranging from young toddlers, children, to even old victims aged up to 70 years old, with over 70% of the victims under 18. The objectives of this bill, Mr. President, the bill is to provide the legal and institutional framework for the protocol for reintegration of victims of rape and insurgency in Nigeria. If this bill is passed into law, it will certainly provide a new lease of life for victims of rape and insurgency in this country. The justice system in Nigeria in this direction is incredibly inept, and for rape cases, this is even more traumatic. A rape victim goes to police to report, and the policeman or woman tells the victim to go and sort it out at home, as it is a domestic case. And the consequences of such act is that the victim is left at the mercy of the society without protection. This sort of stigma has prevented many survivors from reporting abuse and seeking justice. Victims of insurgency and other violent acts need this kind of laws that will not only promote gender equality, the empowerment of women and girls as fundamental to all efforts to prevent and address sexual violence in conflict, but can also progressively uplift such victims by making sure that assistance was not subjected to undesirable limitations, such as denial of a normal livelihood, employment, or the provision of sexual and reproductive health care to help survivors in a standardized manner. Mr. President, distinguished senators, the bill, if passed to law, shall also ensure that the victims of rape and insurgency are reintegrated into the society and given equal rights and opportunities as exist for every citizen of Nigeria. We are all living witnesses to the upsurge of the criminality of rape and the destruction of lives being perpetrated by those coward criminals in our communities. And coupled with the fact that our country has an extremely low conviction rate for rape and sexual abuses, despite the increase in violence against women in recent years. You will all recall that we deliberated recently in this hallowed chamber on violence against women. It is high time we legislate and take actions that will address some of the shortcomings in Nigeria's legal system on issues of stigmatization for victims of rape and violence, where the burden to prove rape or abuse often lies in evidence of it also being a violent attack. And these are not the only challenges facing survivors. Nigeria, home to an estimated 205 million people, has no legislation that will protect or facilitate care and support of survivors. Part of the objectives of this bill is to provide legal solutions and norms to the serious psychological and traumatic experiences such victims suffered, with a view to help the victims understand and deal better with what they are going through and see themselves equal like all of us, to guarantee and protect their rights and privileges like any one of us. Let me use this opportunity to condemn the brutal gang rape and murder of the many, especially the most recent victims. And just as the nation is still coming to terms with this gross violation, another dastardly act was committed in Jigawa State where 11 abled men were arrested for raping a 12-year-old girl at Limawa in Dutse, the state's capital, leaving this little girl with callous lifetime trauma. These heinous crimes against humanity are condemnable and cannot be condoned in any decent society like ours. The perpetrators, too, must be made to face justice. Overview of the clauses of the bill. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, various clauses of the bill enumerated and spell out how the aims and objectives of this bill will be achieved and enforced. This bill contains 11 clauses. The first two clauses emphasize inter alia that every person, community, and institution shall protect and uphold the right to dignity and freedom of association of victims of rape and insurgency, and not stigmatize them or their children born or children born therein. The third clause lays out that it shall be an offense to stigmatize victims of rape or insurgency, and expand on the actions that will amount to this offense. The fourth and fifth clause makes it mandatory for an employer to reabsorb a victim or victims of rape or insurgency, pay their entitlements and the penalties for contravention, respectively. The sixth and seventh clause lay out the rights of an aggrieved party to seek redress in the court of competent jurisdiction and indicates the state high courts as the courts of competent jurisdiction, respectively. The eighth clause empowers the Attorney General and Minister of Justice and the Commissioners of Justice to ensure compliance and enforce the provisions of this bill. The ninth and 10th clause empowers the Minister of Justice to make regulations generally for the purpose of giving effect to the provisions of this bill and for the interpretation, respectively, just as Clause 11 is the citation. The provisions as contained in this bill shall apply throughout the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Conclusion. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we are all aware of the stigmatization faced by victims of rape and insurgency and how it is difficult for them to enforce their rights or seek justice. If this bill is allowed to pass, justice shall be served to the victims of rape and insurgency and by extension, the generality of our citizenry, because the bill will address the injustice that victims of rape and insurgency suffer. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, in view of the foregoing, I urge you all to support the speedy passage of this bill. In compliance with Order 77, subsection 3 of the Senate Standing Order number 2015, as amended, this bill, if passed to law, shall not require any funding because the Attorney General and Minister of Justice and the Commissioners of Justice in various states are empowered to administer and enforce this law. Thank you for your kind attention.
Senator Sandono.
Brutality against women and rape. It is also...
Chief Whip, please, the chamber is noisy.
You would also, like all of us, would also have seen that one of the topmost issues that is gaining currency in Nigeria today is the protest, the unending protest against rape and brutality against our women. once you're in touch with the TV, that is one of the issues that hits you very hard. I granted a couple of interviews after that motion, and one of the things that you would be faced with by journalists is, when is all this going to become a law? How are you people responding practically to these menace? And I said to them, very soon you will hear from us. So I want to commend distinguished Senator Sani Musa for bringing this bill here for second reading. It is a beautiful thing because the nation will see clearly that for us it is actions, not words. They would see clearly that we have a way of moving very quickly from theory to practice. This is a welcome development, and I'm very delighted to be a part of it. Mr. President, a couple of issues have been raised, and I would just like to speak to a few. The first is that we must all seek for ways and means of ensuring that prosecution for rape and brutality against women is accelerated in our judicial process. When you take somebody accused of rape to face the law, and complexities are thrown into the process in such a way that gives advantage to the person who commits rape, it's usually very discouraging for the victims. Let processes be accelerated. Let due attention be given to this very heinous practice, and let justice be served in the way it should be served. One of the things, for instance, in my interaction with lawyers that has been thrown at me is that, look, rape, like murder, should attract no bail. These are some of the issues that I think we should look at when we are examining this bill at the committee level. The second one is the central issue that has been raised in the bill, the issue of stigmatization. I have made the point, and I want to still make it, that we must look for a way of ensuring that these young girls or women do not feel stigmatized at all. The stigma is on the side of the rapist, the beast masquerading as man. That is the person who should be stigmatized, not the victim of the rape. And so parents and these girls should be socialized and educated in such a way and manner that they know this. Because if they summon the audacity and the courage to come to the open all the time and say, look, this man raped me, that man raped me, no matter how close the relationship is, if the person is not conscious of the fact that if it comes to the open, he is stigmatized, nobody should allow any such person become a serial rapist. Because when you don't report these people, when you don't expose them, they also gather the courage to continue to move from one victim to the other. So this bill, like I said, is so critical, is so important, and I support it with every ounce of the energy that I have. Thank you, Mr.
Senator Ike Kornwall.
I recall the interesting story of a young girl that was raped in one of their inter-house sports competitions. How it affected her schooling, how she was humiliated in the village, all the setbacks she suffered, and the embarrassment the family also had. Now, just this morning, one of my constituents from Lagos sent me an email, wanted to find out what we are doing about the growing incident of rape cases. I responded to the email and said that the penal code and the criminal code have sufficient provisions on the offense of rape. But I think the problem really is in terms of the prevention, the investigation, the prosecution, and then the punishment. So I believe that those are outside the purview of the parliament. But however, we have oversight functions to ensure that these things are done. But I'm happy this morning or this afternoon that we are seeing a different dimension of our intervention in the issue of rape in Nigeria. And I want to thank my colleague for bringing this up. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, outside the issue of the punishment, I think there's a social side to this. What has happened in many countries is that they profile those who have committed rape, so that if you are looking for a house, people look at your name and they've committed rape before, you find it extremely difficult to get a house in that neighborhood because the families will be scared about the safety of their family, of their children, especially the young ones. So I believe we need to have proper records of people's convictions and their history and everything that has to do with them, so that when we are dealing with people, you know whom you are dealing with. And I believe that sincerely that this bill is coming at the appropriate time and is sufficiently prepared that we don't need so much debate on it. So I support the bill, and I appeal that everybody support this bill so that it can go an easy passage. So I want to thank my colleague, Musa, for bringing this bill. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. I'm sure the sponsor of this bill and our colleagues who contributed to the debate have spoken for all of us. This is a menace that we have to address in our society, and recently it has spiked up. And that means, like Senator Professor Sunday Ono said, we have to be in a haste to pass the legislation in order to arrest the situation. So I believe that now we all are on the same page, and I'll put the question. Those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, to prohibit the stigmatization of victims of rape and insurgency in order to encourage victims of rape to testify in court and victims of insurgency to be reintegrated into the community of his or her choice, and to provide for the prosecution and punishment of any persons or group of persons who stigmatize such victims with a view to uphold and protect their fundamental right to dignity and free association, as provided by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and for related matters, 2020, second reading.
A bill for an act to prohibit the stigmatization of victims of rape and insurgency in order to encourage victims of rape to testify in court and victims of insurgency to be reintegrated into the community of his or her choice, and to provide for the prosecution and punishment of any persons or group of persons who stigmatize such victims with the view to uphold and protect their fundamental right to dignity and free association as provided by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and for related matters, 2020, second reading taken, and the bill is hereby referred to the Senate Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights, and Legal Matters to report back within 4 weeks. Thank you very much, colleagues. Leader of the Senate.